Hello everybody, this is going to be another video on the MSU shooting. I did a live stream on it a couple days ago. Obviously gun control is probably the topic that I've come to the most in this channel. It's what I started it with, and then coincidentally, I guess in this case, I also went to Michigan State. I went there for 6 years after high school, graduated from there, got a music degree from there. And so a lot of this, I don't want to say it feels close to home. I graduated from there in 2008. I started going there in 2002, so it's been over 20 years since I started. I don't know anybody who goes there now. I have a lot of family members who went there. I had my dad went there. I had an aunt who went there, maybe two aunts who went there. And I had two male cousins and two female cousins who went there, and they all got married to other MSU students and now have a bunch of kids. I think there's 11 children to those four people, and they're all total MSU Spartans all the way, bleed green, all that stuff. So I wanted to give my perspective. Now, it's only been a day, and we're still learning more. There's a lot of questions that I think need to be answered that we don't have answers to. So kind of to start off, I have pulled up here a map of the MSU campus. MSU is a Big Ten school. It's a huge school. When I went there, they were claiming that they had 55,000 students. I believe that included about 10,000 graduate students. It's probably similar. It might be a little bit less now because of COVID, but very, very similar. The campus certainly will not have shrunk since then. And it's a massive, massive campus. And you can see here, I assume you can see my cursor. So the shooting took place here and here. There were many, many reports, and lots of the video that you're seeing are actually from here, so-called East Campus. And I lived here next to the Union and also in East Campus, and then I lived off campus for a couple of years. So just a couple things. This campus is massive. When I would walk, I was a music student, so here's the music building. And when I lived here, this is Holmes Hall. The walk from here to here was about 45 minutes at a good pace. It was not a quick walk. You had to walk down this route, cross here, down, and then along this road. And you could either go behind or in front, but either way, about 45 minutes, lots of buildings, lots of trees, and that's kind of going to be relevant when we look at some of these videos. So it's a big campus. I'm not sure how many of the students live on campus. I was hearing more recently they have 39,000 undergrads. My guess is it's probably 25,000 live on campus. Could be wrong about that. There's obviously massive amounts of off-campus housing in this whole area. Michigan State is in East Lansing, and then Lansing actually touches Lansing. If you see this street here, this is East Michigan Avenue. This goes directly to the state capitol. This is a straight line. If you're on the highway here, this is the main north-south highway 127. This is what I would take when I would go home. When you're on this bridge, you can see the state capitol in this direction, and you can see Spartan Stadium in the distance that way. I used to also live in Lansing, so I'd walk up and down this road or also Kalamazoo Street just about every single day for a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years. So this area, lots of student housing, lots of residential. This street here, M43, but in this area called Grand River Avenue. Grand River Avenue kind of is a major street that crosses most of the lower peninsula of Michigan. And directly across the street from MSU, there's no gate or anything. It's just like a city block where on one side it's Michigan State, on the other side it's the city of East Lansing. Lots of businesses, bookstores, student bookstores, cafes, things like that. So I just want to point out, though, that many of the videos, and I'll go through them, if you see videos of big crowds of people fleeing, those videos are from Acres, which this is Acres here. Again, I lived here in Holmes, so this is Holden, this is Acres. These, as far as I can tell, so the initial reports of shootings, there were reports here, and then there were reports here, IM East, Intramural right here. The Wharton Center, that's where I would have all my concerts. I was a music major, so there's a concert here. I also saw Ravi Shankar there at one point. So I would, walk here. Just walking from here to here is almost a 20-minute walk. You cross this field, it's very, very far. There were also reports from, I want to say Holden, which was way down here, and McDonald. So like we're getting reports from all over, and having watched a couple, and now the police are just saying straight up there were 2 victims at Berkey, which is this building, and 1 at the student union that were killed, and 5 that were injured. They haven't said where the injuries stack up. And so the reports from here are probably not, as far as what the police are saying now, there's no shootings here. There's no evidence even that the shooter was there. No one's alleging that he even fired a shot. And when I've heard interviews or people have uploaded TikToks and whatnot from Acres, for instance, they don't report that they heard gunshots. They don't report that they saw anything. They got word that there was a shooting and people freaked out, understandably freaked out. And so the videos where you see hundreds of people running away in big spots, I'll show some of those in a minute. Those are not, that's understandable fear, but they're not where the shooting is taking place. The shooting is over a mile away, and there's no way they could even hear that. So let's turn this on. So again, huge, huge, huge campus. This section of north of the river, this is the Red Cedar River, colloquially known as the Red Sewer River at Michigan State. This is the original campus going back to the 1800s. It's a bit smaller. The buildings are a bit older. And this is kind of like an expansion from the mid-20th century. A lot of these buildings are from the 50s and 60s. And it's a much larger area. It's much wider. The streets are kind of, see how they're more straight, whereas up here they're kind of curves. There's lots of parks up here. There are not as many down here. But a lot of those videos are from way over here, East Campus, where there were reports, but now apparently there was definitely no shooting there according to the police so far. So we're going to zoom into north because that's where most of this happened. Okay. So this is the kind of area of most interest. So Berkey Hall is where the first shooting took place at 8:15 or 8:11. And then the second one was here at the MSU Union. And for those of you curious, my freshman year I lived in Campbell Hall right here. I lived on the ground floor at the corner right here. There's a little entrance there that I would go in and then walk back. The bathroom was right there. And I could see out this tiny little parking lot that did not fit any cars. And then this is the city, and there's no, I mean, there's some fencing, but like there's open sidewalks. It's not a closed campus at all. They're completely open to anyone coming off the street, and people did come off the street. So the union, I don't know how many colleges have unions. I'm not sure ostensibly, but it's kind of like an all-purpose building. There were some offices there. There was a bowling alley. There was a barber shop. There was a food court. Is a food court. I started going to the MSU Student Union way before I went to MSU, because this is in the Lansing is the state capital. East Lansing is adjacent to the state capital, but because there are so many facilities at Michigan State, if you were in middle school or high school and you were in any kind of activity, it's very likely that those activities would take place at the Union. So when I would have like Science Olympiad in middle school and high school, if we went to states, which we didn't always do, but sometimes did, there would often be events at the Union. And then later, when I was in high school, I was in kind of like a trivia quiz bowl. It was called Quiz Bowl, kind of like Jeopardy. And that was always held at the MSU Union. It's about a 4 or 5 story building. And I was thinking about this after the live stream. This is a little crazy. After I moved off campus, so like my freshman year, I lived in Campbell Hall. Then I moved to Holmes Hall on the far east side, kind of by Acres. But then for the last 2 or 3 years, I lived off campus. I lived in Lansing, really close to Sparrow Hospital, where they treated the victims. And I was, of course, a broke college student, and so I didn't pay for internet. And so I would do all of my internet stuff for school, right? I did have to do stuff online for school. And I would do that at the MSU Union, because I don't know about now, but they had a computer lab in the basement. And so I would walk 3 miles from my apartment, right off Michigan Avenue in Lansing, to the MSU Union, and I would do my work there. And what's kind of weird is that's when I first started going onto YouTube, and that's where I came up with the name for this channel, Lengthy and Arthur, and that's where I started this channel. So literally this YouTube channel started in this building. I didn't realize, it didn't occur to me until after I did the live stream, but yes, the second murder was in the building that this YouTube channel was started in. Now, I didn't upload videos there. I didn't start uploading videos till 3 years after I graduated, but the profile name, where I got the name, and when I started making comments and started watching YouTube for the first time, that all happened at the MSU Union. So it was a long time ago, but there it is. So yeah, like my freshman year, again, I lived right here in Campbell Hall. We'll see there's a video from Campbell Hall looking at the Union, apparently showing one of the victims. So a couple things here. So like Campbell Hall, I was a music student, so this was where I had a lot of classes, but you would have classes other places. I do not remember for certain if I ever had classes at Berkey. It's possible I did. It's possible I also never went into the building. I'm not sure. There's many of these buildings you would not necessarily go. You know, you've like an old botany building, or, you know, I remember one of these is like the anthropology building. You know, I wasn't an anthropology student. There'd be no reason to go in. Berkey, I believe I may have had a German history class in there, or maybe a German history professor who was there. A couple things about the timing of this. We still don't know the motives. Apparently they found the note on the shooter, on the criminal, that he had grievances about a public school he went to in New Jersey, and other ones in other states, but I haven't heard anything specific to Michigan State. They say he had no connection to the school, that he didn't go there, he didn't work there, he had never attended. It's strange to me that this, and I'm not saying this to be conspiratorial or anything, there's lots of plausible explanations, but the fact that this happened at 8:15 is a little strange, because if you were trying to kill as many people as possible, that would not be the best time to go. Apparently they do have evening classes. He attacked an evening class apparently, but there will be many, many more people during the day. And also Michigan State having a huge student body, you do have classes that are kind of smaller, normal, in a normal classroom setting, but you also have many classes that are in auditoriums that are huge. I had classes with 4 or 5, even 600 students. And if somebody was truly, that's what they wanted to do, that seems like, if you wanted to have mass casualties, as many as possible, it seems like you would do that. Now, maybe this guy is crazy. Maybe it was spur of the moment. That wouldn't surprise me, that he didn't plan it out, or he just wasn't a competent mass shooter. I don't know. So I'm kind of curious about that. Thankfully, he did not attack a full, I mean, it's a relative thanks, please understand. But like, when I heard that it was at 8 and it was at Berkey, I kind of was surprised, because that wouldn't be the most target-rich environment. The MSU Union itself, there's people there fairly late. That's one of the more active parts on campus. It's one of the places that's open. They have stuff that's open there at least until 11, and sometimes even later. I think the computer lab, I believe I stayed there till they closed until like 1 or 2. So like, other than maybe the library, which I think is open 24/7, at least part of the year, you know, those would be, but 8 is not that late. A lot of stuff was still open. So let's kind of keep it. But yeah, I lived in this dorm. I would go to the Union every Sunday because they closed the dining hall. The dining hall was normally here in Landon, but they didn't serve Sunday night. So I'd walk over to the MSU Union, and I would get a Little Caesars pizza and an ICB from the food court. Yeah, that's how I got my freshman 15. So let's just see what else. So Campbell, MSU Union. And this first video, I think, is going to be... Okay, so this video is looking at the Union from the west, from Campbell Hall. No, so I was in this dorm, but I wasn't on this floor. This look like this is on maybe the 3rd floor. I was in the basement, essentially. and this is looking at the west entrance to the Union. And the Union is it is a university building, but it's probably the most public accessible. It's right at the northern tip of the university, and there's a lot of people going in and out. There's no barriers. Anyone can walk in there. You don't need to swipe a card. That's another thing I was thinking. In the dorms, even when I was there, you could not get in a dorm at night without an ID card, or, if you had a friend who let you in. But like, they were all the doors were locked. They had attendants. Doesn't mean you couldn't break in. Obviously, it's a college. People were letting people inside doors and stuff, but like, technically, to just walk in, you would need a card. But that's not true at the Union. And the Union really drew a lot of a lot of homeless people would go there. And like, when I was in school, homeless people died there at least once, maybe 2 or 3 times, because there was a large lobby, with comfortable chairs, and students would go there to sit. They'd have meetings, they'd chill. And sometimes homeless people would go in there, and sometimes they'd have heart attacks or overdose or whatever. But like, this building is just very, very, it's not in the heart of the campus. There's no checks. There's no, just walk in and out of the doors. There's nobody verifying that you're a student or anything like that. And too many non-students would use this building anyway. Like I said, I was going there in high school. Obviously, all my family members and all my classmates were going there in high school, even though I was from 2 hours away. A lot of people going to the Union. So this is the west entrance. This is the entrance that I would go in and out of. I would walk from Campbell. I'd cross this little thing was not there, but this crosswalk was, and I would, and they've changed the driveway. This used to, I think, arch, and they changed it a little bit. It's been 20 years, but like, yeah, I would go in there, and that's when I would get my dinner on Sunday. And we can see what I presume to be the third victim, and he does not look good. It looks like he is likely deceased. Yeah, carrying him by all fours. Yeah, he is not good. I would like to know when this video was recorded, how long after the first shots, how long after the incident started. We don't have they should be able to construct an extremely precise timeline, but I haven't seen that yet, and I want to see that to show exactly when things happened. They should be able to almost, certainly within the minute, if not almost to the quarter minute, within 10-15 seconds, figure out when everything happened. I don't know what the state of surveillance is at Michigan State at this point, like how many cameras there are. There were plenty of cameras there when I was there, but I don't think it was that much. A lot of the buildings are older. It's not super modern. Now, this is allegedly a shot of the shooter walking into the Union. I have to say, this entrance does not look familiar to me. It is possible it's different. When I was there, there was an entrance, at least 4 entrances on each side, north, south, east, and west. There may have been 2 on the eastern side, which is the side he would have approached from Berkey. He would have approached from the east. He could have gone in any of them, though. It's easy to walk around the building. It's a big building, but it wouldn't take that long to walk around. But the important thing here is it's pretty clear from this picture that he has a handgun and not a so-called assault rifle. I mean, people were calling for a ban of assault weapons immediately, and it looks like he used a handgun, and he has a history with handguns that we'll talk about in a second. But that's a very relevant thing, that he used a handgun versus anything else, at least if we're going to talk about policy. But this does appear to be him, according to the police. So let's keep going. So this is from across Grand River Avenue, looking at the Union. So this is kind of looking from the north, looking to the southeast. This is Grand River Avenue, again, one of the main streets that separates this is the Michigan State, and then this is the city. And they pan. And so this is the street separating. I think this is called Abbott or Farm Lane. Campbell Hall, where I lived, where that video was recorded, is here, and it was viewing that victim being brought out there. This looks pretty similar to when I was there. Now, so these videos, there's lots of these coming out. So you see this big police presence, and a lot of this has been on CNN, and it shows these. This is where these students are in a dorm. This is in Acres. They say that out loud. It's Acres Hall. You can see Holmes Hall there. That's where I stayed for 2 years. But I want to bring back, Acres Hall is way over here. Okay, so the shooting, we have Berkey Hall here, MSU Union, and then Acres. There is, even if he was out in the open and had like a rifle, I do not believe you could ever hear that. It's like about a mile, maybe more, with lots of buildings. There's a forest, there's a river. And it's a cityscape, lots of traffic. There's lots of traffic on this road. There's lots of traffic on this road. There's traffic on these. Shaw Lane is busy. Wilson is busy. I highly, highly, highly doubt. I mean, I've been here in Holmes Hall when there were riots, like full-on riots happening here, and you couldn't hear it. And that's, the police were shooting flashbangs and tear gas and everything. Like the sound doesn't travel that far. So like I've been here, I've walked on this trail with a full riot, police, everything here, and this distance much further. So look, they knew that there was a shooting happening. They were scared. They're running around. But those videos, those people are not fleeing an active shooter that's actually there. They've heard about it. It sounds like just the rumor. The same with, there were reports down here, but like, yeah, there's panic happening, but these people are over a mile from the shooter. And if the shooter's already happened, it's likely the shooter is heading back to his home in Lansing. They don't know that, so it makes sense that they would still be scared or whatever, but I just want to point it out that like there's a huge panic happening. Let's go back. So a lot of these videos of them panicking and running around are from totally opposite side of the campus. They're not actually fleeing the shooter. I have not seen any videos of people fleeing Berkey Hall. I haven't seen any videos of people fleeing the Union yet. We saw that video of someone bringing a victim out, and this is Representative Slotkin. I don't think the audio is working on this. So this is a rep in Michigan who, well, I want to say a couple things. You can find the clip of this. It's not hard to find. She repeatedly this is a kind of a side issue. I'm going to point it out because it is a common tactic. She constantly refers to children. Now look, these people getting murdered is not okay. It doesn't matter that they're adults. It's not okay to murder adults. It's not like it's worse if you murder a child. But they're all adults. None of them are even 18. I think they're all 19 or 20. They go to college. And to call them kids, you're really trying to get an emotional response out of people. We're looking at a triple homicide and 5 attempted homicides, if not more. 5 maimings at least. All of the injured people were said to be in pretty bad condition. I don't know if there's been updates on that. So this is a serious crime, a very serious crime. This guy would be looking at the highest penalties available if he hadn't killed himself. But they're kids in the same sense that you could call anyone a child, right? The person who committed this is a 40-year-old man. He lives with his dad. He is a child of his father. He is a kid in that sense. So this is very strong manipulation. And she says she's having about an open, honest conversation about what's going on in our society. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. lots of people are happy to have an open and honest society, but it's hard to lead off when you're going to call them kids when they're not kids. They're adults. This is college. It's not an elementary school. Again, that's not to justify it. There's also a point at which how relevant is it? But it's relevant in the sense that she's using this to drum up emotions, to stir up emotions. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, not willing to have conversations about keeping them safe in a place that should be sanctuary. I mean, okay, well, then why do they let homeless drug addicts go into the union all the time? Right? That was going on when I was there. I presume it's still going on. So, if we're going to have an open conversation, maybe don't let all the riffraff in, right? If it's supposed to be a sanctuary, if the idea is that they're kids and that they're babies and they need to be protected from society at large, then fucking build a wall. Like, seclude them. I mean, I thought that at some point you need to grow up and expose yourself to society. There's something about the school, if you're looking K-12 and especially like K-5, where you're isolated from society. You're not really integrating with society. You're not your interface with the rest of society is quite limited, if at all. And maybe there's a good argument for that, but presumably at some point you should start to be exposed to general society, and that's why. I would argue that should happen before, probably middle school and high school, but at the very latest by college. So unless you're going to say, look, we're going to make the college campuses like prisons more than they already are, block them off, have restricted access everywhere, that's an honest kind of conversation. But you're supposed to be exposed. Like, again, there were homeless bums, drug addicts, and I would assume, more than a few criminals walking in and out there all the time, and nobody was checking. And probably overall that's good. I mean, this is a horrible tragedy, but people died there when I was there. People had heart attacks there. People had overdoses there. And one person was killed there at a food court on Monday night. Now, murder is not ethically the same as an overdose, for sure, right? But let's have an open conversation. Why is it allowed that non-students can go in there and I mean, he just walked right in there with a gun, which is illegal, by the way. We'll talk about that. Blah, blah, blah. So Oxford was a town in Michigan that had a school shooting 15 months ago. Again, calling them kids, they're adult. I mean, they can vote. They can be drafted. Calling them kids, children. Also, living through the shooting. For people who are in the food court at the Union or in the classrooms in Berkey, yeah, absolutely. For people living in acres or homes, okay, it was a rough night, but none of those people were they were miles away, over a mile away. I mean, think about if I were to come on here and say, I've been a victim, I've been traumatized, because a mile away from me, across a river, there was a homicide. Right, and to be honest, there have been things way closer to that since I've lived here, and I live in the probably the worst part of New Hampshire. So New Hampshire on average has like the lowest violent crime, but I live in like one of the worst neighborhoods. I have never personally had a problem. I've never personally been attacked or assaulted. I did have someone open my car door once when I didn't lock it, so they didn't break anything, and they took about $1.50 worth of quarters. So there's that. But like in December, I was reading a book on the couch right there at like 3 a.m. and I heard somebody talking really weird. And out on my front porch, like 15 or 20 feet from where I sleep, a person had overdosed. And his companion was with him, and his companion was out of it, had no idea what was going on. And obviously 911 was called and ambulance came and took him away. And I don't know, that person could have died. He definitely had an overdose on my front porch, 10 feet from where I sleep. I have a former roommate who died of a heroin overdose. He didn't do it in front of me or anything, but I lived with him for a couple of years. He died of a heroin overdose. I have heard drive-by shootings twice since I've lived here. They were years ago, but sitting in bed, boom, boom, boom. There's a heroin house, a couple house doors, not blocks, a couple doors down the street, and they were involved in a drug altercation, and there were 2 drive-bys in the course of a week. Maybe 6 years ago, an old man on the street slit his own wrists in an attempt to commit suicide and laid on the street bleeding out, yelling, "I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying," again until the 911 came and took him away. I believe he survived. There's a 7-Eleven 1 block from where I live that's had multiple stabbings, multiple shootings. It's now closed. Open drug use, open shooting of heroin behind their dumpster. There's a cop there shot in the face. So like all that happened within a block. So that's far, 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 far closer than if you were in Acres and there's a shooting at Berkey. Okay. So like to the extent that they're survivors, I'm a survivor. I mean, you're drawing such a huge, and this is a huge school. So again, no disrespect, but there is a qualitative and quantitative difference between I'm in the room or in the building, or I hear the shots, or I know someone personally, or I was at that school. Michigan State is like a city. It's a 50, when you add in this faculty and the employees, you're looking at over 50,000 people spread over 2,000 acres or more. The actual campus extends far to the south because it's an agricultural school, but the main campus where all the buildings is something like, I think 1,500 or 2,000 acres. So it is like having a homicide happen in a city with 50,000 people. Is that bad? Yes. If it happens on your street, understandable. But like by that standard, almost everyone in the United States is a victim of a homicide, right? In that, and if the cordon you can draw around it is that broad, come on, like now maybe there's nuance to be had here and say, well, this is what if this is a shooter who's actively trying to kill students, as many as he can. We don't know that's the case. If it is the case, he didn't do a very good job in terms of where he did it and when, right? So we don't know that for sure. The note he said apparently didn't say anything about Michigan State. We haven't seen the note. I would love to see the note. Who knows what the police are deciding to, that we don't need to know at this point. But that's a little bit different because I could assume, when there's a drive-by that I hear it, and then I hear people screaming in the aftermath, that I'm not the target of that, right? That I shouldn't be too concerned because whatever is going on, I'm not a drug dealer. I don't use drugs. I'm safe. I have a gun myself. I'm in a house. They're probably not coming for me. And I could imagine a student thinking, oh, there's a gunman or maybe gunmen, right? They didn't know initially how many, right? Maybe it's a coordinated thing. Understandable. The fear from the students a mile away, I find is understandable. Even if it turned out to be at the end of the day not warranted in this case, it's completely understandable. But they're like over a mile away across a river with hundreds or thousands of cops, right? She feels confident the law enforcement. Yeah, now the Democrats love police. She's thrilled the federal law enforcement is there. Why? What did they do? Bringing their resources to the fight, the resources that they tax all of us to have and then misuse or lose. Yeah, we're going to rest until we understand. Okay, but they're not having this press conference until they understand. They didn't wait for let's figure out what really happened. Let's figure out the relevant details before we have our press conference. And she even points out, but I think the fact that we're having another mass shooting in our state, so 2 in 2 years, okay, 10 million people, should be a statement in and of itself. Yeah, 2 in 2 years. And I mean, technically, not to be all spurgy, but there aren't it's 4 fatalities in addition to the shooter himself to count as a mass shooting. So by that standard, this isn't even technically a mass shooting. Is it a horrible crime? Is it a big deal? Yeah, it is. It's all those things. But is this 17 people? Is this 53 people? And that, again, that's not to minimize it. But those, I mean, we're just constantly, not that this is a low bar, but like it does seem like the bar is constantly getting lowered. Just anything, if this had been one victim, we'd still be hearing about it. If it had been shots fired but nobody injured, we'd probably still be hearing about it. And if you look, when you see these aggregate totals of like school shootings in the United States, you'll see numbers that are huge, and they include things where there are no victims, where accidental discharge of a police gun, a suicide of a single person. A person commits suicide in the parking lot at midnight. School shooting, right? Happened in a school parking lot. Well, okay, yeah, that's true. But when people hear that, they think Parkland, they think Newtown, they think something like that. And those type events are very, very rare. I saw one of the news anchors say, well, there's been a 150% increase. Okay, from three a year to, 4.5 or 5 a year. It's still very, very rare. And this is a college. These are not kids, right? This is a average day in Chicago or Baltimore or East St. Louis or New York now. New York was better for a while, but its murder rate's up, and I'm sure eclipsed this event since this event has happened. So the other thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to go back. I don't want to look at this lady's face anymore, so let's go back. Does this work? Did I ruin it? Oh no, are we stuck with her? Apparently we are. Oh, okay. Well, maybe I can fix this. There we go. Okay. That's enough of the video. So, a couple things. She wants to have an honest discussion, so let's have an honest discussion. Let's have a policy discussion. So, everyone who's been posting, like Joe Biden did, that we need to ban assault weapons, this guy used a handgun. So banning assault weapons would literally have no effect, right? If you could snap your fingers and all the assault weapons just vanished out of thin air, they just disappeared, that wouldn't have stopped this, because he didn't use a quote-unquote assault weapon. And the term assault weapon is a nebulous political term. It's not really that technically valid, but however it's been applied, it's never been applied to handguns, and this guy used a handgun. And in a broader policy, that makes sense, and that's kind of relevant, because it is the large majority of the homicides committed with guns are committed with one type of handgun or another. The statistics I've seen are kind of old on this, but it was something like 88%, right? So handguns are concealable. Criminals, despite the fears of gun control advocates, they don't want to upgun as much as possible. If you walk around carrying a 50 cal, you just are not going to have any anonymity. You're not going to be able to be discreet. And even though you do have a lot of firepower, you're just going to bring it down on you that much harder. And so 50 cals have literally never been used in a crime in the United States, even though they're vastly more powerful and their ballistic potential is just dwarfs any handgun you're going to hold. They weigh 20 pounds and they require a bipod, and they're 4 or 5 feet long, and they cannot be concealed on a person, right? Unless you completely disassemble them. And even then, I kind of doubt it. So handguns are far and away the preferred method when it comes to gun homicides. And yet we hear about assault weapons. Look, assuming the broader definitions is just any kind of semi-automatic rifle, even ones with wooden stocks and whatnot, that's something like 1 or maybe 2% of the gun homicides. Far less than knives. It's less than clubs. It's less than hands and feet. More people are beaten to death with fists than with assault weapons, which is, again, not to minimize it, not to say that, well, maybe there's an issue there, but it's obviously one of the smallest. And that's the thing. Even among deaths committed with assault weapons, they make up a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage. So why does that percentage drive the argument? Why are not the many, many, many more people who are killed in one-on-one, like basically drug war crimes, drug-related crimes, or just regular crimes, not necessarily drug war related, but criminals committing robberies, armed robberies, robbing liquor stores, robbing gas stations, shooting, like they typically use handguns. Sometimes they use shotguns. And then in rare cases they use rifles. But that's where most of the deaths are suicides. Let's be clear about that. When you hear terms like gun violence, it's a very nebulous term. It's a misleading term. People hear gun violence and they imagine the MSU shooting, and that term broadly does include that, but it also includes 65% are suicides. You've got people who have terminal cancer or who are in their 80s and their spouse dies, and they, blow their brains out, especially men. It's not so common for women. And while you can consider that a tragedy and that's bad and maybe that's something to look at, there's no evidence that the gun availability makes the suicide rate what it is. We have countries that have very few guns that have much higher suicide rates. It's the preferred method among men because it's simple and effective. There are other ways that are fairly effective, but they're easy. So leaping off a high building, but you got to find a high enough building or a high enough bridge, right? So as tragic as those are, that's not the same. It's kind of hard to make the argument that everyone should lose their access to guns so that other people who are terminally ill or very old or have huge mental health problems can't kill themselves. It just makes no sense. All these people say we're going to ban assault weapons. This wasn't an assault weapon. It was a handgun, just like Virginia Tech was a handgun, right? So there wasn't a bump stock. It was handguns. So this is the problem, is it seems pretty clear rhetorically that what they really want to do is just ban guns. They want to make them harder for everyone to get. So interesting things about this shooter. He actually had a conviction for carrying without a concealed weapon. That's another thing I heard. Andrew McCabe, the disgraced CIA traitor who tried to commit a coup against the sitting president and then was fired for his trouble on CNN, saying we shouldn't have unregulated access to these weapons. Well, that's not true. Anytime you buy any gun anywhere in the United States at a federal licensed dealership, you have to do a background check. And in Michigan, on top of that, you need to register all handguns. And in Michigan also, you need to get a concealed carry permit to legally carry a gun. A lot of states have passed so-called constitutional carry, where you don't need a permit to carry. Michigan is not such a state. You do need to get a permit in Michigan. Sorry, my hair is bothering me. And that's interesting. So apparently in 2019, this guy was arrested for carrying a concealed weapon without a permit. I have some questions about that. That is a felony, and he was let off with a misdemeanor. And so, people are pointing the finger at the NRA. I don't see anyone some people are pointing out, well, what about the prosecutor who did not charge this guy with a felony? By the way, full proof, I don't think it should be a felony to carry a concealed weapon without a permit because I believe in constitutional carry, but that is the law in Michigan. So you're catching somebody who's committing a felony and you just let him go with probation. In the police report for that, by the way, he said that he was waiting to get his concealed carry permit, but it sounds like he never got it, which is fascinating. To get the concealed carry permit in Michigan, to draw this back into personal, I became a gun owner when I was a student at Michigan State. Now, I didn't live on campus at that point, but after I moved off campus, that's when I started buying guns. I bought my first 2 handguns when I was there. I bought my first shotgun, my first couple rifles. And at the time when I did that, you did have to jump through even a few more hoops to get a handgun. To get a handgun in Michigan at that point, you needed to get a permit to purchase. All right, so you could not just go and buy a handgun. You had to go to your local police department. So I went to the Lansing City Police Department, which was right downtown Lansing, right by the state capitol. Say I want to get a permit to purchase. They require you to take a test. It's a 10-question true or false test. You had to get 75%. It was an easy test. It was laminated on the countertop and had been taken so many times that you could just see the imprint of the previous answers. And I think I got one wrong, but that was enough. They do a background check, then they give you a little card, and so when you go to the gun store and say I want to buy a handgun, they're going to ask for either a concealed carry permit. If you have a concealed carry permit, that counts as your permit to purchase, or the permit to purchase. You give them the permit to purchase, which I think expires in 10 days, so you can't just get one and then wait until whenever. You have to get it basically right before you're going to buy. Then after you buy the gun, they'll give you a form. And then you have 10 days after that to bring both the gun and the form to the police station, which I have to say is a really kind of nerve-wracking experience to walk into a police station with a concealed gun. I actually called the police department and I said, hey, I have to register my handgun. I bought a Beretta 92 FS, and I don't have a concealed carry permit. And they're like, well, yeah, just bring it in a bag. And I'm like, that's concealed carry, because it is. And they're like, no, you're bringing it to get registered. Now, technically the law in Michigan didn't call it a registration. It called it a safety inspection. And so I walked in and they looked at it and he said, that's a nice Beretta. And they write down the serial numbers and then here's your gun back. And I kind of asked, I was like, hey, did I pass the safety inspection? He goes, oh, he laughed. He goes, we don't actually do that anymore. That's just the law. So for those who don't know the history, you can look this up. Those laws were introduced to disarm black people, literally. The idea was that they didn't want a law that said black people can't have guns. So what they did, and they didn't, strangely enough, they didn't mind black people having rifles or shotguns. They did not want black people having handguns. There was a case, famous case, you can look this up online, called Ossian Sweet. Ossian Sweet was the doctor, African-American doctor. He got attacked by the Klan in the 1920s in the Detroit area. He shot 2 or 3 of them, killed 1 or 2 in self-defense. He got charged with murder. He was acquitted. But the state said, we really don't like this idea of black people having handguns, but we're not going to pass a law saying black people can't have handguns. So they passed a law saying all handguns have to have a safety inspection. And if you were black and you brought it in for a safety inspection, they'd be like, oh, sorry, this isn't a safe gun. You can't have it back. And also, I think I'll point out, when I bought my first gun, I wasn't in Lansing. I had to go to a different place that had what I wanted. And when I went in, there was a black gentleman there who was had already selected what he wanted, and they were already on the phone with the FBI doing the NICS background check. Every time you buy a gun from a licensed federal dealer, you do a background check. And he was already on the phone, and I walked around, checked out the place, picked the gun that I wanted, went, did a background check, got approved, and was out the door, and he was still waiting. And I'm sure the law isn't like, well, we're going to make black people wait on purpose, but if his name is Tyrone Brown, well, there's probably lots of felons with the name Tyrone Brown. So even though this guy almost certainly wasn't a felon, because why would he be in there? He would know that it would be illegal. He'd be committing a crime and being caught in the process. He's just has the misfortune of having a name that a lot of felons have. So, I mean, the gun control in this case is historically and practically speaking racist, which is just another example of the Democrats living up to their history. So to say that they're unregulated is not true. Okay, now the laws have liberalized in Michigan to a degree. However, there is still a handgun registration. Right? It's easier. You can just go and buy one, but when you do, you get a form that you must send to your local police. And I would be real curious to know if this gun was registered. I'm going to guess not. And I'm going to guess he's not a concealed carry permit holder, and I'm going to wonder why that is. He's concealed carrying, but he's not a permit holder, which means he's probably not qualified. It means he either doesn't have the money, which the money's not that high. So I never had a permit in Michigan, but I took the class and looked into it. I took the class just so I could learn how to use a handgun. I didn't grow up with guns. I'd never really handled a handgun before. So I took the class. It was run by a former police chief that I knew, who was my Boy Scout leader. And it was a good class. I learned how to use a handgun, but we went over the laws, what you can do, what you can't do, gun safety, all that stuff. So it was a valuable thing to take. But, the class cost like $250. The license cost like $250, but you had to pass a test It was a little bit longer test. It wasn't just true or false 10 questions. It was like a standardized test. Not super difficult, but not super easy, especially for a lot of older people taking the class who hadn't maybe taken a test in 50 years. And then you have to pass a background check. It seems like this guy did not have a concealed carry permit. He certainly didn't in 2019. He got in legal trouble for it. My guess is that would preclude him from getting it in the past. Now, I don't know what the laws are in Michigan. I have a friend here in New Hampshire, which New Hampshire has constitutional carry now, but it didn't when I first moved here. You still had to get a permit. The permitting process was extremely easy in New Hampshire. You go say, I want to get a handgun. They do a background check. You pay $10. Boom. You could conceal carry at that point. But my friend had a series of arrests. Now, none of them were violent crimes. They were all misdemeanors. No theft or anything. They're all civil disobedience stuff, not cooperating with a cop, resisting arrest, things like that. And when he applied for his permit in New Hampshire, they said no. They said you can't because you have this criminal history. Now, criminal nonviolent history, none of it involved guns, but they raised objections. Now, the law was changed so where you didn't need a permit anymore, so it became a moot point. But if they're doing that in Michigan to somebody, or doing that in New Hampshire to somebody who doesn't have any violent crimes or any gun charges, I would imagine that this guy, I don't know if he even legally could. There might have been a legal prescription, but my guess is that even if there wasn't, they would not have allowed him to get a concealed carry permit. If he wanted one back in 2019 and he was able to get one, he would have one. So there's more we need to know about him. We'd love to know where he got this gun, but I'm going to guess it wasn't registered. And he didn't have a CCW. He didn't have a concealed carry permit. So what more regulation? Oh, and then the other big one, and I was pretty sure this was the case. Concealed carry in Michigan is not allowed in classrooms, so-called, and this has been interpreted to mean an entire college campus. So yes, you have concealed carry in Michigan. You have concealed carry across the street on Grand River Avenue. You don't have it in Berkey Hall, and you don't have it in the MSU Student Union. So when people say it's not regulated, that's just not true. He would have had to pass a background check to purchase any gun at all. He specifically would have to register his handgun, and he specifically could expect that there would be nobody there with a handgun to defend themselves. There's not going to be Elijah Dickin there. There's not going to be Stephen Williford, just to name two examples of concealed carry permit holders defending people against mass shooters, because it's illegal, and concealed carry holders are the most law-abiding people that exist. So statistically, I'm not just saying that as hyperbole, but it's like literally statistically true. So to say it's unregulated is false. Michigan, it's not as strict as it was, but it's not nothing anymore. You do register, and this, of course, begs the question, how would registration even have prevented or helped this? The answer is it doesn't. Registration doesn't do anything. And so what are they really talking about? Well, some of them will say the quiet part out loud, and then they wonder why they get so much backlash. Now, you can say children, and you can say victims, and you can say all that, and we'll even just say that's true. But if we're going to have a policy debate, you're going to look at the pros and the cons. You cannot only look at the cons. You cannot only look at the victims and say their blood, their blood, their blood. Again, an argument that they don't use for anything else. Well, what about all the people who die from overdoses of drugs? It's 100,000 people a year now. Or when I was at Michigan State, it was only 10 or 11,000 people a year. There's now a huge opioid crisis, and it's 100,000 people a year. So that's triple the number of total gun deaths, including the suicides and the accidents. It's 8 or 9 times the number of gun homicides. It's triple the number of auto accidents. Okay, so does the guy who overdosed on my front porch, does my roommate who died of heroin, are we going to are we going to throw a moral outrage to this? The other one that I always love to point out, because I'm a teetotaler, is alcohol. Alcohol is 30,000 plus a year, just straight up alcohol poisoning, not counting drunk driving, not counting all the other problems, not counting all the crimes that are aggravated with alcohol. I mean, there's a guy from my hometown who was almost killed at a bar with a knife. He was almost shanked to death. And it was just because the other guy was drunk. The other guy was drunk and thought he was somebody else, right? So they hadn't had an argument. They had no beef. They didn't know each other. But this other guy was drunk, mistook this acquaintance, wasn't really a friend, but this acquaintance for somebody else, came up behind him and just shanked him and almost killed him. And it was, he was drunk. And that's why he did it. I mean, it was the main, if he had not been drunk, he would not have been so stupid. He wouldn't have been, his judgment would have been so impaired. So are these people, Mothers Against Drunk Driving no more? We're going to ban alcohol, which has there's no, it's unhealthy. It costs money, blah, blah, blah. The moral indignation is so selective. And of course, they don't feel that way about people killed in drone strikes. Right. Of course, they don't feel that way about people killed in wars. I mean, when a Republican does it, yeah, but when a Democrat does it, it's fine. They don't have a problem with it. And they don't have a problem with children being killed if it's the ATF or the FBI doing it. They can fucking butcher children like it's a safari and pose over their corpses, and they'll be lauded as heroes. So it's very, very selective. And we know guns are not only killing instruments. They have legitimate purposes, and some of them are totally not even debated. Yes, you can target shoot with them, you can hunt with them, you can collect them, and those are all legitimate. And people will say, well, that's true, but the value of an innocent life being taken, that's so much more important than your target shooting or your sport, your sport shooting or collecting. And I would agree with that, but those are not the only reasons that people use guns that are legitimate, because they also use them in self-defense. Now, people have this perception that that never happens, but there are plenty of documented cases. You can go online right now and spend the rest of your life watching videos of people using guns in self-defense. Now, it's usually not stopping a mass shooting. Mass shootings are super, super rare. So the number of them that are also stopped by a concealed carry holder, even more rare, although those exist. Stephen Williford and Elijah Dickin, just two that come to mind that are recent ones, but the Appalachian School of Law, there have been a couple. That involve a citizen with a gun stopping a mass shooting. But much more common than that is they just stop more mundane crimes. And even the CDC, which is very anti-gun and pushes this idea that guns are a public health crisis, blah, 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 they admit that the numbers are between 500,000 and 3 million per year self-defensive gun uses. Now, that is a big range. It's difficult with the research because a lot of times these are events that don't register, right? If you're walking down the street and somebody accosts you, threatens you, and you pull out a handgun and they run away, you may not report that to the police. No crime actually happened, or technically you might have committed a crime because that might be considered brandishing in many places, but it's probably not going to get reported. Gary Kleck has done the best research on this, and his numbers also they agree with the CDC's numbers. Okay, so a lot of people will say Gary Kleck, blah, 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 even though he's a very well-established, esteemed criminologist who did not come at this from the angle of a pro-gun person. He was quite neutral in it. His numbers agree with the CDC's numbers. There is a range, but the lower end of that range is 500,000. Now, does that mean 500,000 lives were saved? No, not necessarily. Not all of those crimes would have resulted in a homicide. But you start doing the numbers, and it's like, well, if it's 1%, that's 5,000. Okay, so that's a lot, right? That's very, very significant. And if you're going to have a policy debate and you just say, I don't care, I am just going to omit, you're not being objective, you're not being honest, right? This representative wants to have an honest discussion, I don't care about the self-defense gun uses, they don't matter. And philosophically, this seems to be the case. A lot of these people, and it's rare in the United States. I have heard it from Australians who are just I just straight up believe you don't have the right to self-defense. If you get attacked, it's your duty to be a victim. You can try and run, you can try and hide, you can beg, but you cannot fight back. You can't take the law into your own hands. I'm it's not the law, it's your fucking life, and you can take it in your own hands. And even most of the pro-gun control liberals in the United States would hesitate to deny that. But that is kind of what they're talking about, because registration's not going to stop this. Background check's not going to stop this. Red flag's not going to stop this. This guy had somewhat of a record and walked right through it. And even if the gun was legal, he could have gotten it illegally. I'm going to guess it's not legal, though, because we would know about the registration otherwise. That would have come out. Maybe it will, so remains to be seen. It could also just not be his. He lives with his dad. It could be his dad's, right? And that's just the fact of life. So what are they going to do? Just say we shouldn't allow people to have them? But it gives it away when they go after assault weapons. But what does that have to do with this? These weren't assault weapons. This was a handgun. And I mean, maybe it will come out that there was an assault weapon used at Berkey Hall, but when he walks into the Union, he's got a handgun. So I'm going to guess that's what he used, and he has a history with handguns. So they've got a narrative all set to go, and they wheel it out every time this happens, and they're surprised when we're not persuaded by their talking points for the 25th time or the 26th time. Oh, and then the other big lie, this only happens in the United States. Yeah, these people obviously never heard of Charlie Hebdo. They never heard of Bataclan. They never heard of Andrew Breivik in Norway. In terms of industrialized countries, the United States is in the middle in terms of mass shootings. Mass shootings are very rare. They make up only a tiny percentage of homicides. But it is a phenomenon that happens all over the Western world. It even happens in places like Australia. They had another mass shooting last year. Despite their super restrictive laws, that's fewer than the United States, but Australia has less than a tenth the number of people as the United States. They had them in the UK. They've had them in the UK after their gun control. So the Cumbria mass shooting, that's not very many, but the UK's only had 3 in their history. So they don't never, even when guns were more legally available there, they only had 2. And since they've made them really restricted, they've had 1. Okay, that's a black swan event. But they happen in Scandinavia. They happen in India. They happen in Nigeria. They happen all over Latin America. But among Western countries, the United States is about in the middle. And it's quite tone deaf and stupid and quite ignorant when they'll say things like this doesn't happen in other countries. Charlie Hebdo and Bataclan was way worse than this. It was over 100 people killed. Right. And now they have this thing where they don't count gun violence if Muslims do it. Then that's terrorism, and they don't count that as gun violence. But that's completely false. We have these events all over the world. They're much worse in Latin America than they are here. They're much worse in other parts. I mean, I've pointed out the Norway thing because they had such a huge. I think the Norway mass shooting was something like 68 victims. But but that was one shooting. It's not the only one in Norway, but. Yeah, but Norway's a tiny country, right? It's like people will look at the United States and look, well, you had this many, and Belgium only had this many. So I'm like, yeah, but Belgium has, 10 million people? Not even. The United States has 330 million people, right? It's apples and oranges. It's just so much bigger. It's as big as all of Europe put together practically, or at least half of it, all of Western Europe. So yeah, you want to have an honest conversation? Let's go through the stats, And I think because this guy was black, I think it's going to calm down pretty quick because we don't want to harp too much on black people committing violence because the narrative is that they're always victims. And to be fair, it is actually true that mass shooters are typically not African Americans. African Americans commit about half the homicides, especially African American men. They're very underrepresented when it comes to mass shootings for whatever reason. So this is an atypical case as far as that goes. I'm also just kind of curious about his motives. It seems very poorly planned if that was the idea. He may have just been an unhinged, angry guy who just went off. I don't know. We may never know because he killed himself. Justice will not have been served then, and we won't learn what maybe we should from this. But you want to have an open and honest discussion, then let's talk about all that stuff. You can't just grandstand and call everyone kids and say, if you don't agree with me, you're a butcher and you're just as bad as this guy, except for the prosecutor who let him go. She gets no mention at all because she was appointed by Soros and she's a Democrat. But I'll leave it there. Thank you all very much, and talk to you soon. Goodbye.